What's up, studs? Kunal here, Bulls on Wall Street. Yo, we got a lot to go over today because, the taco came, right? The taco came and the market gapped up like 3%. Now, look, if you were just chasing off the, get-go, the first candles, you would have got smoked out, because obviously a 3.5% gap up, like you're not breaking out the highs from that type of gap. But it was still very tradable, a lot of action in hot names, but you did have to pick the right stuff and not chase. Let's dig into what the heck's happening in the markets and then what the heck we're going to trade tomorrow because, dude, the bull could be back on, right? We don't know. We went from bear market trading to bull market trading like pretty quickly. So first of all, Trump tacoed like everybody kind of knew he would, but the question was when he would, right? I mean, we thought he would do it before, and he really kind of took it, kind of put everybody on edge, and then finally he came out and he did the taco. Now, look, the market was already up 3-4 days in a row, and then it gapped up today, and so we just kind of sat around on the indices. And so, like, if you chased the open and you were not positioned for the gap up, then it was a little bit tricky at the open. You saw big rugs and, right, like, Tesla, like right off the gate. You saw big rugs and, all sorts of random software names, Palantir, So, if you were chasing the first candle, you would have been displeased. This ASTS looked great, right? But then it kind of, so there were plays, but you kind of had to take like these like little baby, right? Like these little baby shreds, not necessarily like any, right? Like, a lot of times if you get a small gap up, you're like really like hooting and tooting like the first candles, right? You're like, shit, we break out, we break the pre-market high and we're just going for it. We weren't in that phase of the day, but it was still like just fantastic trading. We had one of the best days we've had in forever in the chat room, playing stocks like, AAOI and, this kind of stuff where you really had all the beautiful heat. So photonics was hot, memory was hot, some of the old plays started to spark up. So I think that's, a good sign. You saw WDC break out to highs here. You saw SanDisk and Light and so many names just kind of crushing out, And so look, today's one of those days when you get a big gap up, you get basically one setup, right? Where it's just like at some point you're going to get that first dip somewhere and then you've got to play it, right? And you'll always kind of see that, that's what I was telling my guys in the morning. Like there isn't much you can do on a 3% gap up on the day trading side, except there will be a hot setup somewhere. You just got to get that first little dip, right? And so you can see like the market gapped up and it kind of pulled back down here, right into the bone zone, and then you got a couple hours of uptrend to really go out and do the Lord's work. So what do we go tomorrow? Well, I'm of the opinion now that any gap downs we get or weak opens probably get bought up. So if we gap down tomorrow, say we come down and like test like 600 or something like that, that's probably getting bought up. Now we are on day 5 of a move, so like you may get a day's worth of weakness, but gut feeling on this based on what the charts are telling me and the price action of the last week or so, that the dips are going to get bought up, and I don't know if we're breaking out. We may just be entering closer to the top of the range, which still gives us about 40 points more upside, guys. And that's a direct possibility. Look, when you think about market indices, market indices can spend oftentimes, long periods of time where you're just stuck in range. If anybody remembers like 2015, 2014, it's one of those years. And like, dude, we were just like kind of like nozzling near the highs for like a damn year, it felt like. It was crazy. So always kind of keep mind of that. Those things can happen here. Whoa, somebody's logging daddy out here. So just kind of be mindful of that. It's a direct possibility that we can do something like that. But hey, let's go out and find out what we could trade tomorrow. I'm on my MacBook right now because I'm in the office. So let's figure out what we want to do for tomorrow. AOI is a daily trader for us. We've literally made, 10, 15 trades on this in the last few days. It's breaking out the highs. It is at the top of the Bollinger Band. It probably needs a little bit of a rest day. But if it, like, say you get a weak open, and it does open weak quite a bit, if you get a weak open, it's probably going red to green, but it really could use like an inside day or rest day because you're about 22 points from the 9 EMA. If it gaps up tomorrow, it probably rolls over and the setup is, is invalid. So just kind of be mindful of that. I only want to hit this on weakness. I was swinging some calls on this. The 120 strikes from, a few days ago. They were cheap as a motherfucker. I went 2 weeks out to 4-17. They were like $1 and some change, but they were so illiquid, it was hard to get any size on them. I think something like a figure could go tomorrow. You were up 10% today, and you kind of got a nice rounding pattern. I feel like some of these could be chased up. If the market keeps cruising, you're going to see some action in some of these type of names. And this one's actually had really, really good range of recent. GLW is testing highs. Had a big gap up. It actually trended out pretty good. So this is what I was talking about. Like, you get kind of like one setup. You're going to get that big pull at some point that day. And then, you kind of get this, back to the upside. Love the look of this. Like, you're up at highs. Now, you just got to be careful not chasing this stuff. NBIS looks great for the coming days. 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests of resistance. It needs a rest day too. You can see the 9 EMA is at 113, so you got to be like a little bit careful. It needs probably an inside day here to back and fill, or maybe a small red day, but an inside day would do it. And I think that could be, a hottie with the body. Boom, 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 boom. Now, those are turds. Where did this bad boy go? ARM has got a little bit of a trend line break here. Didn't have much action on it today compared to some of the other ones, but that's okay. Like, I would consider this more of just like a little bit of a rest phase. But if it breaks out this level tomorrow, let's see. Let's get up in this thing. Like, I think that one's got a little bit of a chance. ACAM looks fantastic. Boom, 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 boom. We got a trend line break on this. It trades so thin, guys. I slammed, I think, like 1,000 shares of this the other day, thinking I was being safe, and I was down like fucking $400 on the spread at the open. It was like not a huge deal, but when you have a spread like that, you feel a little tinkle in the pants at times. So just be a little bit mindful of that. Netflix, I think, is gearing up here too. It's had kind of 3 like weird days where it's like kind of faded up its gap. I think it's just tightened up its range for that kind of $100 roll. So let's keep an eye on that one. If we need some shorts here, guys, old Figma's got a flat bottom breakdown to IPO lows. If it gaps up tomorrow, let's fade this. I know it's fallen a lot, right? It was at $100, but it's still a $10 billion market cap. Like, come on. Like, nobody's going to be using Fig anymore. Short this thing down to 0. I think Palantir here, if we get any strength on this, let's look to fade this. You got a bear flag kind of right here, about 136. I think that could be something. W-Days, another one, right? You got a big breakdown over here. Like, you gapped up and just faded off. A Tesla, as much as I want to always buy Tesla and believe in Tesla and, because they do all the cool stuff and right, this thing's a very weak structure on this too. Does it have maybe a mean reversion tomorrow? You are coming into like some demand zones here. It's a direct possibility, but you can't ignore the price action of like when you gap up and then you fade it off 25 points. That's a no buenos right there. On a day where the market's up, 3.5%, this is, faded off 20 something points from its highs. That's a no buenos. And then look, we have some other names out here that need pullbacks that I really like AEHR and some of these, but they're going to need to kind of set up a little bit. So keep an eye on this, but set some alerts. Like, look, it's, it got $25 away from its breakout point, right? So you need multiple days of pullback on something like this. So stay away from these kind of heaters. I think, they look great and the volume is picking up. But like when you're $25, $20 away from your 9 EMA, like that's too much, right? Like, if anything over a thumb's worth is a little bit, you're getting a little bit extended. So that's the list. And then of course, I'm still waiting here. They're not doing it yet, but just, we've been day trading these back and forth to some okay success, but waiting on these space stocks to just start to kind of cook and book. over the SpaceX IPO. They did kind of roll over slightly today, but I think they'll see at some point as, these days go on, each one of these companies is going to start putting out PRs and just get their juice going so that they can probably dilute going into the SpaceX IPO. But hey, that's a trade we want to be in. So guys, we're still a news-driven market. Trump has said this, Iran said this, so what? Let's see if we get any weakness in the market. It'll be a tell. If the bulls buy it up, then the bottom's in. I love you guys. Peace.